right, welcome back everybody. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome to Notes to Fret, where we are all about turning theory into riffs. And in this week's video, we are going to be continuing our conversation about the modes, but in particular, we're going to be looking at our relative modes, which means we're going to be looking at the circle of fifths quite a bit and really unlocking all the secrets that this circle of fifths is giving us about modes, and just a ton of information that, you know, has been staring us right in the face for so long. Just a little bit of different perspective as we move through the video to make the circle of fifths, you know, even more informative to us, not just from our fifths and our fourths, but from our modes as well. And so we'll be diving into that. And that is what we're going to be focusing on with the relative modes this week. So with that being said, right off the bat, we're looking at the circle of fifths. I'm kind of going to move away some of the stuff because what I want to do is focus in at the top, in this case, C major. And in that C major, we're going to acknowledge that we have a B diminished, right? That's a chord, but it's just a B. Now, looking at this, we all talk to ourselves about the C major or A minor. And we say, okay, well, in C major and A minor, there are no sharps or no flats. And so we're going to be looking at that from a musical perspective. But before you look at music and think to yourselves, nope, in the video, I am not going to be teaching us how to read music or anything else. Really, what we're going to be looking at is a bunch of stuff that's not there. So we're not going to be even putting anything on the musical staff. It's really just kind of showing what's invisible or not there. So it makes it even easier. And one of the things I want to do is kind of point out that right next to this treble clef, that crazy looking thing is called the treble clef. If you want to remember that, cool. If you don't, you're not going to miss anything on this lesson. But directly next to that, inside of this blue circle, there are no sharps or no flats, right? There's that pound sign or the flat note sign. There's none of that in there, right? Nothing. So the key signature says there are no sharps or no flats. So we immediately go, okay, well, if there are no sharps or no flats, it must be C major or A minor. And most of us just kind of think about this instinctually. We just go, okay, those are kind of our two options, right? And so we ask ourselves, what is the actual key when there are no sharps or no flats? Is it C or is it A? What is that, right? And we ask ourselves this kind of all the time. And with that question, typically how we, you know, kind of come up with it is if the first note or the first chord is C, we go, okay, I'm in C major. But if the first note or the first chord is A, we say we're in A minor, right? It doesn't matter if you know that where these notes are on the clef to know if they're C or A. That's not important, but right, it's just we typically ask ourselves based off the first note or the first chord to determine whether or not we're in C major or A minor, right? That's kind of how we go, but there's more to it than that. Staying within the key of C major or A minor, no sharps, no flats, really what we are asking ourselves, we're not asking ourselves is it C major or A minor. What we're really asking ourselves is it C Ionian or C Aeolian? And why this is important is because now what we're looking at is we have two separate modes. One of the modes is Ionian. One of the other modes is Aeolian. We have two separate modes with the exact same key signature. Okay? So you will 99.99999999999% of the time just say, you know, is this a key signature of C major or C minor? And that you should continue to do that. But to understand fundamentally what's going on here and how to understand relative modes, you just need to look at this a little bit differently. You'll still refer to this as C major or A minor. But here, the real question is, we have a key signature and we're asking ourselves, with this key signature, do I have a C Ionian or do I have a piece that's A Aeolian? Okay, that's the real question. That's the fundamental kind of music theory question. Now, why is that important? Because what happens if the first chord or the first note is D? And trust, this is a D. If you want to remember it, go for it. If you don't, that's cool too. You don't need it for this lesson. That's a D though. I would never lie to you about that. Now, you may be thinking, okay, well, if that's a D, that must mean maybe I'm not in C major or A minor anymore. So maybe I'm in D minor. And if you look at that and you come over, there's a problem here because D minor has a B flat. And we're looking at the key signature and there's no flats, there's no sharps, right? So that's a problem. So maybe we say, okay, well, maybe it's, maybe that means D major, right? And so we come over here and that doesn't work out either because now we have two sharps, right? Now we have a F sharp and a C sharp and there are no sharps in our key signature. There's nothing there. So our key signature continues to tell us that there are no sharps or there are no flats. So at the very minimum, we know we have to be in C major, C Ionian, right? So we're kind of coming back to where we were originally. But we're starting on D. Like something has to be, different here. Well, if we look at D, that's just D Dorian, right? And so that's our relative Dorian. A minor was our relative Aeolian, and D Dorian is our relative Dorian, right? That's it. And you can see here on the circle of fifths, if we come over counterclockwise, one section, and then down, over and down, we get the D, right? And if we look at that, we say, okay, what happens if I'm in E? Well, yeah, same exact thing, right? If we look at E major, well, there's a lot of sharps in that, and so that's not going to work. So when we look at E in the signature, the key signature says 0 sharps or 0 flats, we kind of say, okay, well, 0 sharps, 0 flats. We're in C, so that's good. That means we're in C major. And now we have E. Well, it just means that we're in E minor, or E Phrygian. And remember, Phrygian is a minor mode. And it's over clockwise one segment and down, or a perfect fifth up from A minor. Right? And so by looking at the circle of fifths, we kind of see, our relative modes, and we kind of start to understand, right? It's the same exact thing here. We have two modes, in this case, C Ionian or E Phrygian. We have two separate modes. They're relative modes, but they share the same key signature. That's it. That's really all that relative modes are, right? It's just different modes with the same key signature. And in this case, we're looking at Phrygian. Now, one of the other things that a lot of musicians, but we guitarists tend to do to ourselves a lot, we'll say, okay, what's the relative minor? And we look at Aeolian, right? Our relative minor, A minor, in this case. And we fundamentally just understand that it's directly below C major. Right? We just kind of fundamentally understand that and we accept it. If I asked anybody on this channel, what's the relative minor of E flat major? Every single one of you looking at the circle of fifths would go, okay, that's C minor. Bam. And you'd be 100% correct. If I asked anybody to tell me what the relative minor to B major, you'd look at the circle of fifths and say, oh, G sharp minor. And you just get it and you would accept it, right? It's just an acceptance that we tend to all have. And it's correct, right? If I asked what the relative minor of A flat major is, looking at the circle of fifths, everybody just say, okay, it's F minor. And just like fundamentally accept that, right? Just accept that we look at the circle of fifths and we go, okay, well, that's the relative minor. And again, 100% correct. But now when we look at Dorian, okay, and it's, in this case, when we're looking at the top, when we're looking at C major, and it's what's the relative Dorian, right? It's D in this case. And it's kind of over, looking at the circle of fifths, it's over to our left or counterclockwise. We don't really accept that. We kind of go, well, why is it over to the left? Right? Why? How did you get? We accept that A minor is directly below or directly next to the major, but we move to the left or the right, and now we're like, hey, wait a minute. We don't accept that anymore. So it makes that learning pattern very difficult, because with the relative minors, we just look and we accept and we move on. I'm going to explain how all of this works out here in a moment, but for now, just kind of accept it at face value. And as we move through the lesson, we're going to fully understand this. But for now, just say, okay, that's where the Dorian location is. That's where the Phrygian location is, right? And the Phrygian, when we're looking at it, we're saying that's our relative Phrygian, right? That's our E, right? But again, just kind of accept that Dorian's over to the left and Phrygian's over to the right. And by doing that, just kind of by accepting that, it's going to help you just kind of pick it up, right? It will be as easy for you if I said, what's the relative minor of B flat major? And you go, oh, G minor, right? Done. But if I said, hey, what's the relative Dorian to B flat major? It's C minor. As long as you kind of accept these for the time being, you'll pick it up much more quickly. But again, with all that being said, it's always one of those things that if you're getting something out of these videos, be sure to click that like. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that bell notification and make sure you get notified of everything, because again, really helps out the channel. So always huge appreciation if you're getting something out of these videos. With that being said, let's go ahead and return back to our regularly scheduled program. So here, back at the circle of fifths, and we're going to still maintain our focus on C major. Now here, as we're trying to understand, right, we accept that the relative minors directly below or directly next, the relative Dorians over to the left, the relative Phrygians over to the right, so on and so forth. But how does that really come up, right? Well, first off, we always start with what key or what major key are we truly in right off the bat. And here we're going to say C, right? That's where we are. We're in the C major mode, C Ionian. And if you remember, all our modes, we're talking about the modes of the major scale. That's why we start off with the major, because we're saying the modes of the major scale, right? So we just start off here. Now, we've spoken previously on the channel how critically important it is to remember the order of the modes, right? I don't punch like Muhammad Ali. And there was another great one from one of the viewers. You know who you are. Huge shout out to you, because I like yours as well. Another one is I don't play loud music after lunch. However you want to look at it, it's completely fine, but you want to remember the modes in that order. And this is one of the reasons why, because it helps unlock the secrets of the circle of fifths with your relative modes. The next one, right, I don't punch. So we're going to start with D, or I don't play, right? We're going to start with D. The next one is our Dorian. Now, as an incidental with the C major scale or the C scale, then we just move to the next letter, right? So the next letter or the next note is D. And so that's how I know that D is counterclockwise, right? Or left of center. That's how I know, right? Dorian, D, done. Now, I don't punch like, or I don't play loud, whatever. The P, right, is Phrygian. And we just say, what's the next note or what's the next letter in the scale? What's E, right? And so there's our Phrygian. And so that's how I know that Phrygian's over to the right, or, 1/5 up from A minor. And I just keep on going with that, right? I don't punch like, or I don't play loud. So I know I'm hitting Lydian, and the next letter or next note in the scale is F. And so therefore F, right? That's where my relative Lydian is. I don't play loud music, or I don't punch like Muhammad. Got that M, right? And so what's the next letter in the scale? It's G. Right? And so I don't punch like Muhammad Ali. I kind of have the L in there, but I don't play loud music after lunch, whichever it may be. Aeolian, right? What's the next letter? What's the next note in the scale? It's A. And then we have our Locrian, right? I don't punch like Muhammad Ali, or I don't play loud music after lunch. we have our L, and then we have our B, right? And then that's where I'm getting it from. So just by looking at the sequence of notes in the scale and understanding the order of my modes, right? I need to remember this order. And there's right there in front of me on the circle of fifths, I fully understand all the relative modes in my key. That's it, right? And so as we're looking at this, it's important to understand that all of these modes are relative, right? So we talk about what's the difference between C major and A minor? There are no sharps or no flats. Well, C major and A minor, they're relative modes. That's the difference. They're relative modes. What's the relative Dorian? D. What's the relative Lydian? F. And by the way, this is what you're looking at as you move your scale patterns up and down the neck, right? So if you're looking at your A minor on your fifth fret, right? And then you're trying to figure out, what the G major is, and you move up to the third fret, right? We're talking about your low E string, and you start your scales from different locations on the neck. What you're doing is you're playing your relative modes, right? That's most of us when we're learning modes. Unfortunately, we're always learning the relative, so it does make it difficult to say what's the difference between C major and A minor. There are no sharps, no flats. I think that kind of serves to confuse students initially, but most of us just learn it that way. So these are all relative modes that have the exact same key signature. But what I do want to do is focus in on another key. It's going to be the exact same principles, but we're going to look at E major just to kind of clarify the point and kind of drive things home here a little bit. Right, so we're in E major, so our Ionian, we're going to start with E, no problem. What's the next letter in our scale? Well, we know that's F, and we know that the next mode is Dorian, and so there it is. Now you may be thinking, okay, well, it's F sharp. Sure, but if you got to understand your scales a little bit, right? And I put a lot of videos together about understanding the scales. To understand where the F sharp comes from. And you can go back and look at those, and I highly encourage you to. Or you can just look right here at the circle of fifths, and the circle of fifths is correct. And you say, okay, well, E major has an F sharp, and it's an F sharp minor in it. And it's right here for us, right? You can also go, and please do, learn your scales, but we can look at it right here and go, okay, well, F sharp is in the key of E major. Same thing when we look at our Phrygian. Now looking at our Phrygian, same exact thing, right? We're just going to the next note in the scale. In this case, it's G sharp. Done, right? And you can see the location, right? It's exactly the location from D minor and E minor by way of comparison to C major at the top, right? It's still over to the left or to the right, counterclockwise, clockwise, however you want to look at it. Then we look at Lydian, and we say, okay, well, what's the next letter in the scale? Well, it's A. Okay, there we have Lydian. Mixolydian, what's the next letter in the scale? B. No problem, right? And again, understanding the order of the modes, right? I don't play loud music after lunch. I don't punch like Muhammad Ali, whichever one works best for you, or another. But you do need to remember them in this order because you're going to line them up with each note in the scale, right? Aeolian, in this case, C sharp, no problem. And then Locrian, ultimately, we have our D sharp. Now, the one thing that you may be looking at this and going, okay, well, wait a minute, Jeff. F sharp, yeah, that might be the next note. That's Dorian, but on the circle of fifths, it has this minor. And C sharp has a minor. And G sharp has a minor. And A and B and E don't. Like, maybe, Jeff, you're missing something. There's something, sketchy here. But if we take a step back and you just want to look at the circle of fifths for all the information, which is fine because it's accurate and it's totally correct, or you can go back and, look at the scales. Remember, F sharp is our Dorian mode. Well, Dorian's a minor mode. G sharp is minor, and it's Phrygian. Well, remember, Phrygian is a minor mode. C sharp is Aeolian. And remember, Aeolian is a minor mode. Now, the only one that you might be looking at and going, okay, well, what about D sharp? It's the Locrian mode. It still has a minor third, but it has a diminished fifth. So, if you want to call it a minor mode or diminished mode, half dozen one, sixth in the other. If somebody wants to, blast me in the comments, I'll give you a thumbs up. Sure, whichever. But when we look at the F sharp, G sharp, and C sharp, those are minor modes. And how do you remember minor modes? Does it have the word Lydian in it? No, then it's minor. Does it have the word Lydian in it? Yes, it's major. You just have to remember that Ionian's major as well. That's pretty much about it. Now here, the one thing I do want to point out as well is looking back at our musical staff, this is the key signature of E major or C sharp minor. And again, we usually, well, almost always, refer to key signatures as either major or minor. But all of these modes right here share the exact same key signature. That's why they're relative, right? So D sharp Locrian, no matter, it's not even Locrian, whatever, it's just not even worth confusing yourself with. But if you really want to, if you wanted to play a piece of music in Locrian, you would still have this exact same key signature if it was D sharp Locrian. Or if you wanted to play a piece in G sharp Phrygian, it would be this exact same key signature. If you wanted to play a piece in E major or E Ionian, it's this exact same key signature. So these are your relative modes, right? And so this is you moving up and down the fretboard as you play each one of the patterns of your scale. That's your relative, right? If you always start on C, from C major to C minor, those are your parallel modes. But when you move from C major back to A minor, those are your relative modes. It's right here in the circle of fifths. The circle of fifths literally gives you everything you could possibly imagine about a given key signature. Everything. So it's a great little piece of musical information to have. I don't think I have a single. I may have one. I don't think I have a single musical notebook where on the first page I don't have the circle of fifths. Even if the book that notebook or whatever it is I'm working on, I'll staple the circle of a picture of the circle of fifths in there. Like I don't go anywhere without the circle of fifths and looking at it from this perspective, because it unlocks everything, and it's such an incredibly convenient and rapid reference. Anything I want, I just look at the circle of fifths and I know where I'm going, and we move on. So it might be beneficial for you to kind of unlocking these secrets might be very helpful. But anyways, with that being said, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the exercises this week, because they're going to be a little bit different. Here, the first exercise is to create a backing track. Again, you're going to have that C just kind of droning on. But here, make certain that you really put in the C major, right? Really get that third involved. Potentially the seventh, right? You'll get a little bit of dissonance in there, so it might mess with your ear a little bit. So just start off with a C major chord. And with the C major chord, really emphasizing that major third, what you can then do from there is play your major modes over that, right? So now you're going to play the Ionian, the Lydian, and the Mixolydian modes over and over against that major third or that C major chord. And you'll hear your ear will start to get trained on understanding how the majors kind of flow together, those major modes, the relative ones, right? Make certain that you're using relative modes this week. So when you're playing your Ionian, right? If you're joining away on C Ionian, make certain that you're moving to don't move to Dorian or Phrygian, move to your Lydian and move towards your Mixolydian. Those are those are the modes that you want to emphasize over the major, the C major chord that you're going to be playing on the background, right? And relative. So again, you'll be playing, you'll be playing that C Ionian, and then you'll be moving to F Lydian, and then your G Mixolydian, right? So you're moving up and down the fretboard doing nothing but the major patterns, right? Against that C major, relative. So you will be moving up and down the fretboard. Now, with that being said, same exact thing that you're going to want to do this week is create a backing track. Only this time you're going to be doing the A minor chord, right? Everything this week is going to be about the C major scale. No sharps, no flats. So you're going to have a backing track now of that A minor chord. And here with that A minor chord, right? And make sure, again, you use that third. Make sure you really emphasize the minor aspect to it. Here, now you will be moving to that D Dorian. And then the E Phrygian, right? So you'll be moving up and down the neck quite a bit, playing your minor patterns, because these are your relative minors. And it will start to help your ear really understand what some of these minors over that minor chord start to really sound like. And then, just play with that. And I think your ear over the week will get a very fundamental understanding of how the relative modes start to work, right? Especially if you compare it against the exercise we did last week, which we really emphasized the parallel modes. So great exercise, fantastic for the ear. I think you'll get a lot out of it. But with that being said, as always, huge appreciation to everybody who stuck around the video this long. If you got something out of it, please don't hesitate. Thumbs up. Always an appreciation. If you have any questions or comments, put it down in the comments. I have a community page now. Go ahead and post in there, and I'll happily answer anybody's questions that might be out there for anybody. And again, it's free for you. It's free. YouTube doesn't charge anything. I don't charge anything. If you haven't done so already, smash that subscribe. Huge help to the channel. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close out this video. And next week, we will jump back into kind of hearing the modes and kind of returning to playing through some of the chord progressions. And next week, we'll be attacking the Phrygian mode. So with that being said, thanks again, everybody. Have a great week, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.